What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to a quick live stream post game Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens wild card round, a game that ended like I think many people thought it was going to end, but at the same time still stung, hurt the fan base, didn't leave anybody feeling good about this one. A 28-14 loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It extends their playoff losing streak to 6. Their years without a playoff win to 8. Things are just all around pretty brutal for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know that, everybody's looking for change. Everybody's talking about what comes and what should happen. And is it time to get rid of Mike Tomlin or other names? Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, George Pickens, Najee Harris. The list goes on and on and on again. Well, I figured it's a perfect time to jump on here, make sure that I answer as many questions as I can. I know I'm not really looking at the camera. It's a little bit above me. I'm in a hotel room, but we're going to jump on here. I'm going to give you my 3 talking points that I have for the game, real nice and quick. And then I will dive into all of your questions. We'll stay on for a while. I got to check out of here in about an hour. So we'll make sure we answer all of the questions, as many questions as we can before this one is over. So please make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. Make sure that you toss them in as question form. That way I know to make sure to look for them as I'm scrolling through. It's just me. Nick is still recovering from good old Vegas. We'll talk Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens real fast. And I think it's 3 parts here. It's Mike Tomlin, it's the defense, it's Russell Wilson. And we'll start with Mike Tomlin. Everybody wants to make an argument for or against the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's very simple. Mike Tomlin very much so would have a coaching job tomorrow if he got fired today. That is no question. There's no questions asked on that one. But that doesn't mean that things don't run stale for certain teams. It doesn't mean that Mike Tomlin isn't one loss away from tying Marty Schottenheimer as the most losing first-round head coach in the NFL all time. That is a proven track record that simply does not work. The Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at it saying, he's our guy. He continues to win. He continues to pull off winning seasons. I 100% agree with that. I don't think Mike Tomlin is a bad coach. I think there's very much so a difference between a head coach that has built this and it no longer works, a head coach that needs a change of scenery, which is what I believe Mike Tomlin needs. I think Mike Tomlin needs to lose control of the defense. This can no longer be a Mike Tomlin defense. And I think on top of that, he has to be somewhere where he can suit his skill set. A fantastic motivator, a guy that can work in game, not very well, but if he concentrates on just that, I would expect him to get better at it and to have a hand in everything, in preparing everything, because nobody predicts games and what's important in these games better than Mike Tomlin without actually going out there on Sundays and being the guy that calls all the plays. That is what Mike Tomlin should not be doing and what is doing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think this is a Mike Tomlin isn't good situation. I don't think this is a Mike Tomlin is washed situation. I think it's very simple. Sometimes the message runs dry. Sometimes you need a change. Sometimes when you leave, it gets better. And I think for both parties here, if it left, it would get better. Mike Tomlin would have success, and there would be 20 coaches in the NFL who lost their job tomorrow so that their team can hire Mike Tomlin immediately. At the same time, the Pittsburgh Steelers could go out there and find that next Mike Tomlin, because that's what they'd be looking for, is another Mike Tomlin, which is great because you'd have 20 years before you'd look at it and say, okay, the message ran dry. The ability to get these things rolling, the ability to keep guys accountable, the ability to keep guys motivated is fresh again, which is something the Pittsburgh Steelers do not have. I, again, don't think this is a Mike Tomlin stinks situation. I think it's very simply a Mike Tomlin's message is not the same. The Pittsburgh Steelers need change. Mike Tomlin is the easiest change that you can make in this situation. On the other side of that, you talk Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and where do the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks go? And once again, you throw for 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. You're not a bad player. This is not a bad team. It is simply a situation where the Pittsburgh Steelers are at a point where there are many questions about how you fix this, how you go about fixing it. And we're going to dive into it in a little bit. I'm sure that there will be questions about how you fix it. But quite simply, I don't think that this is fixable in a year. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have dug themselves a hole defensively and put themselves in a situation where they're paying over $100 million for a group of guys that they can't get rid of, that they might have to get rid of. To fix this, you might have to move on from your core five. That might just be the only solution here. And you can't do that. The offensive side of things, you can fix. You could fix the whole thing. You could go get wide receivers. You could go get a new running back. You could hope that your offensive line improves with a year of experience, because half of this line is young and inexperienced, and you're going to replace a guy like Dan Moore next season and hope Broderick Jones is better as a left tackle. You're going to hope Troy Fautanu is a first-round talent because you drafted him in the first round. Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick should take steps forward. The offensive line is fixable, hopefully just as is. You could go get a wide receiver, fix the wide receiver game. You could go get a new running back, re-sign Jaylen Warren, and you have a backfield that's explosive. Those are fixable. The quarterback position is the question. And where it comes into this, the reason I'm against Russell Wilson is not simply because I think Russell Wilson stinks. I don't think Russell Wilson stinks. Do I think Russell Wilson has the I'm going to win you a Super Bowl gene anymore? No, I don't. But I think the Pittsburgh Steelers may find themselves in a situation where this isn't fixable next year, and they have to do a little bit more extreme changes to fix it. It might be time where we start talking, not rebuild, but regroup and rechange some things. And that could mean a year or two of just trying to figure this out. And what you're not going to do is try to figure this out with a 36-year-old quarterback who's worth $40 million a season. That is not what you're going to do. You could do that with a 26-year-old if you kept Justin Fields, but I don't think the Steelers are going to keep Justin Fields, and I don't think Justin Fields wants to be in Pittsburgh. I think quite simply the Steelers have to look for another option. Now, what are those options? I don't know. I have no idea. It's a bad year for the NFL draft. Maybe you go get a guy like Daniel Jones and you say, yeah, whatever, man, we could just figure it out, even if it's not going to work out. I don't think that's a good option, just naming options. Maybe you make a trade for somebody else. Maybe you do bring back Justin Fields. I don't know, but I do think that it's a massive question and one that needs to be answered instead of ignored by re-signing Russell Wilson, because that's what I believe happens is if you re-sign Russell Wilson, I believe you're just ignoring the situation and trying to push this thing out longer when, quite frankly, you shouldn't be pushing this thing out any longer. And then finally, the defense. I touched on it a little bit with Russ. I'll touch on it a little bit more here. Sorry. I very simply believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers core five, Minka, Cam, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, Patrick Queen, just may need to be blown up. It may need to be hit. We may have hit a time where Cam Hayward's the best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, and you're not going to get rid of him. You're going to let him retire here. You don't want TJ to go anywhere, but TJ put up a goose egg in the playoff game, and that's concerning. You have Alex Highsmith, who's a stud, but you're not winning through your pass rush anymore. Your inside linebackers are hit or miss. And Minka, I think, is peaking to a place where it's like trading in a car. Right now, he is at a point where his value and his trade-in rate are pretty even. And the Steelers might hit a point where they're no longer even, and you can't hit that point. You have to avoid that point. You have to make a move before that point actually surpasses, which might be this offseason. Now, will they? Chances are no. Should they? Probably, because you could get a decent bit for a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick, and it's time to just try something new in Pittsburgh because that is what's going on here. It is 8 years of downfalls, 8 years of lack of success, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but it's just very simple. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done the same things for a long time, and they haven't worked. The Pittsburgh Steelers didn't have answers last night. I was in those press conferences. I was in the locker room. Nobody had an answer. Everybody just simply said, it's We just got beat. We got grown man beat. And that is when you know changes need to happen because your team just simply wasn't good enough to win. So go make your team good enough to win instead of trying to make the team you have good enough to win because that doesn't work. You learned your lesson in a number of places this past offseason. The Pittsburgh Steelers learned they needed a new quarterback. They had to get rid of a wide receiver because it was making a lot of difficult or it was making life difficult in a lot of areas. They had to change their inside linebacker room. They had to add to their offensive line and change their offensive line. These are all things the Steelers knew needed to happen. Okay, well, you're at a point where maybe those changes are significantly bigger, but change still needs to happen. And I think the defensive side of the ball is where change needs to happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The offense, you just have to fix, but half the offense is gone after the season. It's not you have to replace guys. You just have to let them walk and then create a new team. You have to create a new offense this offseason. That's what the Steelers have to do. The defensive side of the football, you have to actually fix. And I think that's where it becomes worrisome because I don't know if the Steelers are capable of fixing it. All right. Those are my 3 bullet points here. It's been a tough time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I jumped on here to make sure that I'm talking what's next. Okay. What comes for the Pittsburgh Steelers? What changes can happen this offseason? I'll give you guys a list, then I will dive into all your questions. Please make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. I'm going to get to as many as I can before I got to check out of here. Changes that start at the top. I would imagine Russell Wilson or a quarterback is different in 2025. I do not believe the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to bring back Russ for another season. I thought that they were close to. I think at one point they were destined to, and they believed wholeheartedly that was their best opportunity. I don't believe that is the case anymore. I do not think Russell Wilson will come back in 2025. Justin Fields is a different story, but I've talked about this before. I'll talk about it again. The Steelers might have screwed themselves out of the Justin Fields thing simply because they just set him up for failure. They set him up to go out there, look good, and then yank him and just kill his motivation, kill his pride. And that's not a guy that wants to come back to your organization. That's not a guy you're going to rely on. I think the Steelers should. I don't know if they're going to. They might find themselves in a spot where Justin Fields is by far the best option that they can get. And because of that, they have to go with Justin Fields. But I don't know if that's the case as of right now. Along the offensive line is where we'll go next. Dan Moore's gone. I would imagine Broderick Jones moves to the left side. Troy Fautanu jumps to the right side if he's healthy. Maybe you replace Isaac Seumalo, but I don't think that is a big deal right now. You're going to let James Daniels walk, and Mason McCormick is going to be your starting right guard for the future. And that is your young offensive line. And I feel good about that young offensive line. Why wouldn't you feel good about that young offensive line? Yeah, they struggled this year. They had a 4th-round rookie starting, and guys all over the place. Injuries out the wazoo. Okay, let's see what happens next year as they develop, as you have guys that looked good, showed promise, take a step forward, gain that year of experience in the NFL. In the backfield, Najee is not going to come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, unfortunately. He blamed everything on the media last night, saying that the noise, the outside noise was too toxic and the Steelers were listening to it, and that was the issue. TJ Watt said 5 minutes later that he doesn't listen to any outside noise. It just doesn't feel like it's a match made in heaven for the Pittsburgh Steelers and Najee Harris. I do not expect him to return to the Steelers. Instead, I expect them to bring back Jaylen Warren, who kind of became the bell cow, not the bell cow, but the guy near the end of the season, and draft somebody. 2nd round, maybe a 3rd round draft pick, somewhere in that early mid-round range where you could get a guy like Tre'Davion Henderson or Johnson out of Iowa, or if he comes out, Nick Singleton, who remains my favorite running back in college football right now. Any of those guys and more, I would expect to be on the board and on the Pittsburgh Steelers radar. The big one is wide receiver, my friend. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I'll tell you this. I do not expect George Pickens to return to the Steelers in 2025. I think the Steelers are going to trade him. That would be my guess, and it is only a guess. I think the Steelers are going to trade him, send him somewhere for potentially a 1st-round pick, maybe a 2nd-round pick, and earn their way to a new wide receiver core. Maybe that includes T. Higgins. That still remains my top choice for the Steelers and a name that I think they could sign this offseason unless he gets an offer from Kansas City or somewhere crazy like that. I could see T. Higgins saying, yeah, let's go to Pittsburgh where I get to play for Mike Tomlin, a franchise that does go to the playoffs and is looking to fix that, and potentially a quarterback in Justin Fields if he does return. I think T. Higgins would be all about that, plus some money. T. Higgins is a move. Christian Kirk for a trade wouldn't surprise me either. He's coming off a broken collarbone. This isn't a torn ACL. Things are different. I could see that happening. And then on the back end of this, you go to the NFL draft, you take somebody first, second, maybe third round in the NFL draft. You hope Calvin Austin takes another step forward because he looked good this year and that Roman Wilson comes back firing. That is your receiving core. Plus Ben Skoranek. Let's not forget Ben Skoranek. On the defensive side of the ball, I do not expect Larry Ogunjobi to return in 2025. And I think Keanu Benton takes a step to the outside, playing where Larry O played, and the Steelers go and get a nose tackle, whether that's Javon Hargrave, whether that's a guy in the NFL draft. It doesn't matter. You could go get a nose tackle there. It's the easiest position to go fill in the NFL, and the Steelers can go fill it. There's no reason to pay big bucks for anybody. You just go get somebody. I think that is an easy fix for the Steelers because Keanu Benton came on strong at the end of this season and looks like a stud. So you let him be a stud in the position he should be in, not the position he's currently playing. I don't know what to expect when it comes to the inside linebackers because Landon Roberts feels like a Pittsburgh Steeler, but Cole Holcomb is back, so you don't know if he's going to stick around. Patrick Queen will be here. Peyton Wilson, what's going on with Peyton Wilson? Is he the guy? Is he the future? I don't know. I look at it and say that the inside linebacker room is the biggest question mark. And then obviously corners. Joey Porter Jr. will be back. Corey Trice will be back. James Pierre will probably be back. Cam Sutton will not. Beanie Bishop will. I would expect another slot guy to come in here, and then you go get an outside corner. Those are the changes I expect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right. With that said, I know the internet's starting to get a little crazy. So before it starts getting super crazy, I want to answer some questions here and make sure that I get to all you guys, or as many as I can, before this thing either crashes out, which I hope it doesn't, or I got to check out of this hotel room. We're going to start with Faceless Man here. I appreciate you guys as always. Coach T would be great in Chicago, New England, Las Vegas, Carolina, or even Jacksonville. We're getting to the playoffs. Would be a W for a franchise. In Pittsburgh, it's not enough anymore. Change or get fired. Sack the DC and O-line coaches. I can't disagree with any of this, okay? I don't think Pat Meyer is somebody who's done an extraordinary job recently. I think at one point he was doing great. I don't think he's been doing as great. Terrell Austin, I love Terrell Austin as a person, and I think he's a genius of a coach. I think he does so many great things. I just don't know if he is the guy making these calls or not making these calls, if he's the guy preaching effort or letting these things fall. You got to remember that this is Mike Tomlin's defense. It always has been Mike Tomlin's defense. And that is why I think a change of scenery is important for him, because he needs to be somewhere where it's not his defense. It's just his team. He is just the head coach, but there is no need to be anything more. That's what I think fits best for Mike Tomlin. In Pittsburgh, he's the coach, the defensive play caller. He runs everything. If an offensive play is going to get called and he wants it to get called a different way, he's going to call it his way. He's going to change things. That's who Mike Tomlin is. I agree. I think coaching changes, I would say, should come, probably won't come, because you're not going to get rid of TA. He's on a contract through 2026. You're going to keep him through 2026. Pat Meyer, I don't know what his contract is. He could be somebody who is moved this offseason. I could see that happening. And as for Mike Tomlin, I think in maybe 31 other organizations, Mike Tomlin is gone after this season. In Pittsburgh, he's not. And maybe he should be. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm just saying in a lot of other places, Mike Tomlin isn't here this offseason. Tomlin has failed us. The standard was not met. We need to clean house and fix the culture for real this time. We need a franchise quarterback as well. I agree with the franchise quarterback. I think the offense is in a spot where you have an offensive line, or at least you've invested in that offensive line. Now you just need it to actually come into fruition. If that happens, go get a franchise quarterback. Your offense is so easy to fix that, yeah, you need a franchise quarterback. The problem there is that there are no franchise quarterbacks in this NFL draft. There might be two in Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, but I'm not very high on either of those guys. I'm not high on Jalen Milroe. I think he has potential, but I don't view him as a starting quarterback in the NFL right now. I think Justin might be the best option the Steelers have. It's not the best option ever, but it might be the best option they have this season. And then you go into next year, maybe you make a move for a franchise quarterback. Maybe that is time. I don't know if that's what they would do. It's hard to believe. It would, a lot of factors will go into that. But when it comes to right now, if you're talking franchise quarterback, Justin might be your best bet. He's not the best bet. He's not the best choice ever. He might be the best choice in a bad quarterback year. All right, I'm going to scroll through these. Bear with me as I try to read them and talk to you guys at the same time. Why punt on 4th and inches? Why are we paying a defense $130 million for no production? Why are we starting a 36-year-old quarterback? Why can't Tomlin win a playoff game? Why do we not change? The 4th and inches thing blew my mind. That was the definition of we play to our fears, which is something Mike Tomlin does pretty constant or consistent. I don't know what's going on. I expect change, my friend. I will say that. I expect change. And I think a 36-year-old quarterback is not going to be part of that change. He will be on the outside looking in. I do expect some things to go differently for Pittsburgh this offseason. I don't know if I expect it from Tomlin. I think I simply expect it from Rooney and Omar Khan for them to say, this ain't it, man. This is going bad. This hasn't been it. We need to make this it before it continues to go south. And we are an even bigger laughing stock of the NFL because right now the Pittsburgh Steelers are a laughing stock of the NFL. Trade Tomlin, hire Ben Johnson, sign T. Higgins, start Fields. So here's the problem with the Mike Tomlin trade, and I'm glad that we brought this up early. Mike Tomlin has a no trade clause in his contract. He's paid about $14 million a season, roughly. He's got a 3-year deal, which means that Mike Tomlin doesn't want to get traded. He wants to get fired. I mean, he wants to stay in Pittsburgh. That's what he wants to do. But if the Steelers were going to move on from him, he doesn't want to go to Chicago. He doesn't want to go to Jacksonville. He wants to get fired so that he could get paid $45 million over the next 3 years from the Pittsburgh Steelers and then go sign a new deal somewhere else where he's getting paid a boatload of money from them too. That's what he wants to happen. If he did want out. He doesn't want out. I don't want to make it sound like he does. He wants to stay in Pittsburgh forever. But if the decision was, hey, Mike, we're thinking about trading you, his no trade clause is going to make it very, very difficult to do so. When is Art Rooney going to realize that Tomlin is the reason we are being outcoached by real playoff contenders? I don't know. It's hard to say yes to this and no to this. Like the Steelers didn't have effort. The Steelers culture is dead. And I think that's what it comes down to is I think the message has gone stale. I think Mike Tomlin's motivational factors, I think Mike Tomlin keeping this team crazier and more, I'll punch you in the face than any other team in the NFL. I'll fight harder than any other team in the NFL. Whether they've gotten tired of it or whether it just isn't doing it anymore, I don't know. But I think Mike Tomlin has lost that piece of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it clearly wasn't there last night. I mean, you saw guys not running around, a lot of jogging, a lot of not trying to tackle. It was borderline pathetic for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers mental health check. I hope everybody's doing well after last night. I do. This is a good one. I like Mike Tomlin. I think he's a great coach, but what do we do at this point? That's a great question. And I appreciate this question. I think the Steelers, in their eyes, in their mind, believe that there are so many holes on this team that it isn't Mike Tomlin right now. And if that's the way they're going to go about it, see what happens when you fix the holes. But try to take things away from Mike Tomlin. Don't give him control over making Russell Wilson the starting quarterback and then dropping some wild statement in week 7 saying that's why I'm highly compensated, because it just makes you look like an idiot at the end of the season, quite frankly. Like that's what this came down to. Um I believe that if you patched all the holes, the Steelers wouldn't have any more excuses, and we would get a chance to see if Mike Tomlin still really does got it or if he doesn't. And I think patching those holes on the offensive side of the ball is realistic. On the defensive side of the ball, probably isn't. But they've done that to themselves. Like, you don't sign these guys for $130 million when they aren't when they aren't making plays. And the Steelers need them to make plays. Can they? I don't know. A lot of them are nearing or over the age of 30. That's not a place to be for a defense making that kind of money. Mike Tomlin or Arthur Smith has to go. Horrible play calling. We've talked a lot about Tomlin, but Arthur Smith is a guy that, to be honest, I think last night was just funny. Funny is the word, because he did things. The Steelers offense did things like run a flea flicker when you should never run a flea flicker, ever. When you're not a team that does that, when you're not a team that does all these crazy things. If you're a team that does all these crazy things throughout the season, if you're the Detroit Lions offense, yeah, go run a flea flicker in the playoffs. But if you're walking into the wild card weekend saying we're burning the boats, we're doing everything, and you just look like you just pulled off all the stops and none of them worked, it's probably because you haven't done them ever again. Stop holding your bullets and just be a good offense that beats teams by doing all this crazy stuff. If that's what it takes, do it all season long. But that's not how the Steelers operate. And I don't know if that's an Arthur Smith thing or if that's a Mike Tomlin thing. I don't know, but I do agree that it didn't look good. It didn't look good. Jackson Dart fits the RPO play action game. I like Jackson Dart. I just don't think he is a starting quarterback in 2025, maybe even 2026. Like, there's still a lot of development left in that kid. I like him, but that's my thing is this draft class comes with a lot of people that you're just taking shots on. Jackson Dart's not going to go as high as some of these other names, so that'll help. But as much as I like Jackson Dart, I love Jackson Dart as a college football coach or quarterback. I'm just uncertain about how quickly you could get into here and how important these other positions are. Like, if the Steelers don't have a corner next year, what do they do? If they don't have a defensive tackle, what do they do? If they don't have a running back or a wide receiver, what do they do? Do they really need a backup quarterback? I just don't know if that's like the risk reward. I don't think is high enough in this draft class. That's my only downfall with guys, but I like Jackson Dart a lot, actually. Coming into this season, but definitely last season, he was like my favorite quarterback in the NFL or in college football. Is Rooney paying attention? Does he even get involved? Rooney tries not to get involved very often with what the Steelers are doing and the changes that need to come. That being said, last year you kind of felt the tone was different and Art Rooney was ready for things to be drastically different. And I would imagine that after yesterday, it's only gotten worse. So my guess is that Art Rooney is going to be more involved this offseason and definitely have his hand or his finger on the direction of the Steelers and changes that need to be made that maybe he thinks the coaching staff is ignoring to make. Um, Somebody told me to trade Justin Fields to the Browns and draft a quarter isn't that crazy. Noah, love your show. Appreciate you, Ernie. I would never in a million years trade Justin Fields to the Cleveland Browns simply because Justin Fields is 26 years old. And yeah, you send him in the Browns and he stinks. Great. Shout out. You just did yourself a favor as the Pittsburgh Steelers. You trade him to the Browns and he's fantastic. He's a franchise quarterback. You just made your life very difficult. And I think Justin Fields is in the last 5 years, 6 years, maybe one of the top five, top six players to come into the draft prospect wise. I'm not saying he turned out to be that. I'm just saying talent wise, what he could have become is up there on the board. And if that happens in Cleveland, the Steelers will be in a much worse spot than they're in right now. The Steelers dread the word rebuild, but it's the only point in this case. Trade TJ Watt, Hayward, Minka, and Tomlin for some first and second round picks and start over. Get rid of Khan. Mike, don't adjust. I would never get rid of Omar Khan. That's where I would start on this one. I hear you with the rebuild. I think the Steelers are at a point where they need to readjust a lot of things and maybe get rid of some of their core players. I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. I would not get rid of Omar Khan. I think he's fantastic, actually. Broderick Jones didn't work out, but a lot of these other draft picks did, and he just makes noise. He's a very good general manager. In the trade cases, Cam Hayward, I wouldn't trade. I get he's 35 years old, but he's the best player on your team this season. Minka, I think I would consider, depending on what you could get for him. If I'm TJ Watt, I want out of Pittsburgh. Like, I know he doesn't want out of Pittsburgh, but if I'm TJ, I want out of Pittsburgh. Like, send me to a competitor. Send me to somebody who's going to win a Super Bowl. I deserve to go try to win a Super Bowl. That's TJ deserves to go try to win a Super Bowl. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I agree with that one. You should trade Minka. I don't think Tomlin's going to get traded, but I mean, I hear you. I'm about to move on from Tomlin. I'm on that train. I wouldn't get rid of Omar Khan. I would keep Cam Hayward. I think TJ Watt is one of the best players to ever play the game of football. But if I'm him, I want out. And if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, maybe I'm listening. Maybe I'm listening. All right, we're jumping back and forth here. I'm trying to respectfully, I don't think the defense is the problem. If we had an offense, they would have had to be on the field as long as they have been. I agree, but watching last night, it was just as much where are the inside linebackers? Why could you not stop the option game? What's going on here? Where's the tackling as it was the offense? I don't disagree with you. I really don't. I get that the offense is a problem. I'm just saying I think that in the grand scheme of things, the defense has not played as well as they should have played recently. And last night they maxed. I mean, you give up 300 yards rushing, you deserve to lose. Doesn't matter how good your offense is or how bad your offense is. You give up 300 rushing yards, you deserve to lose. And that's where the Steelers were last night. And in moments, like, they score a touchdown and then they give up a 44-yard run to Derrick Henry for a touchdown. Like, that's not on the offense. That's on the defense. I think it goes. I agree. I think the offense hurts the defense, but I also think that this is a situation where the defense is pretty bad. I already read this one. Sorry, guys. Shout out to Noah for working on Sunday after a postseason elimination. Here's a little something for your next Starbucks run. I appreciate you, Broderick. I appreciate all you guys jumping on. I'm sitting here. My wife is on the other side of this wall. We're going to go check out Baltimore. The real heroes today are the Pittsburgh Steelers for not doing locker cleanout day at noon on a Sunday. Shout out to them. We'll have plenty coming tomorrow, but there was no chance I wasn't jumping on to make sure that I got to answer all your guys' questions, especially after last night. That's just, my job's to make sure you guys are as informed as humanly possible, and I'm gonna do that for you guys. All right, I'm gonna keep it trucking here. Just got a Daniel Jones LOL. I know. I hear what I said. I get it. I don't think Daniel Jones is good. I get it, but I think a flyer over Russell Wilson is a better option. That most likely turns out to be worse. Yeah, it comes with the acknowledgement of most likely turns out to be a worse option. Again, Justin Fields is the only thing where you look at it and say that seems to make a lot of sense, and it seems to make too much sense to the point where you think the Steelers aren't going to do it. Um, Does Mike Tomlin run the offense too? It seems very similar since Ben's last season, no matter who the OC or quarterback is. He doesn't run the offense. However, he is pretty heavily involved in game planning for the offense. So you saw a lot of differences between, I know that the results were bad, but you saw a lot of differences between Arthur Smith's offense and Matt Canada's offense. Um, I think a lot of the similarities came from the restrictions of Russell Wilson. He just cannot see the middle of the field these days. He does not make second reads. I think a lot of the struggles were on what Russ can't do, and that limited Arthur Smith's offense. But I do think there were differences, significant differences. When it comes to controlling the offense, though, yeah, Mike doesn't call the plays, but he is pretty heavily involved in helping formulate the plan for Sunday. Um, Secondary, this playoff game wasn't that bad, but the defensive line played horrible. Nobody could get to the quarterback and make a tackle. I agree. Um, I think Dante Jackson played really bad, but I believe overall the rest of the secondary wasn't the worst. I think he was really the only bad part. Cam Sutton also played pretty bad. Um, but the defensive line is, I think it improves if you get rid of Larry Ogunjobi, move Keanu Benton over, and get a new nose tackle. I think that improves. I think it takes pressure off of TJ Watt because, quite frankly, if Larry O's lining up next to TJ Watt, nobody's got to focus on Larry O. So I think that changes some things next season. I don't know how much, but I do think it does change and help a little bit. How does Tomlin justify not going for it on 4th and 3 inches? I do not know, my friend. I do not know. Even Russell Wilson said, "Yeah, I think we could have got it." Yeah, everybody thought you could have got it. It was 4th and an inch. Like, you go for it on 4th and an inch in the playoffs. But that is, Mike Tomlin is a guy who lives in his fears, who says that he doesn't. And that has always been the case with Mike Tomlin. Um, Somebody just said, bring in Andy Dalton. um, Sorry, just reading, trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Somebody's at the door. 1 second, guys. Housekeeping just knocked on my door. All right. What are your top 3 replacement options for Mike Tomlin? Ben Johnson tops the list, obviously. I mean, he is the guy. Mike Vrabel, I think, would be a really good one, but Mike Vrabel's going to sign with New England. I wouldn't be surprised if he already did sign with New England. But that would be, oh, shit. He did sign with New England. So there it is. That's that. I would take him off the board. But he would be he would have been up there too. Ben Johnson, Brian Flores, I think is going to be a good one too. But Ben Johnson tops the list. Easy. All right, let's find one more here to finish off the show. There's so many comments, and half of you guys are just like, "This sucks. This is terrible," and the other half is just, "Hey, let's keep it trucking. How do we fix this?" And then there's like some dude calling me a clown. Let's go to the bottom here. Let's make sure we're not missing anybody. I appreciate you guys. fucking housekeeping pro asker. That's hilarious. I've never had housekeeping knock in a live stream. We got to be shocked that we haven't, huh? Here we go. This is how we'll end the show. What happens with George Pickens? George Pickens said last night that he isn't optimistic about the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, which I don't think was taken at or should have been taken as such a shot as it was, because I think it was just him being a jerk and not wanting to answer a question when it came back to bite him in the butt. Maybe if you weren't a jerk, it wouldn't happen. But and I'm not saying George is a jerk. I just think in the moment he was fired up. I think he was like, hey, I don't want to talk to these people. I'm going to move on. And it came back to get him. I tried to calm that. I tried to make sure everybody that came in afterwards, everybody online knew, like, hey, George probably didn't mean this in the derogatory way that everybody thought he did. That being said, I don't think George Pickens comes back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I look at it very simply and say, you could get a lot for George Pickens. Go get a lot for George Pickens. You're not going to sign him to $30 million. That's what he's going to be looking for. I just think that you have to you have to move on from guys, as many guys as you can, in a way that's constructive, and George Pickens is a constructive move on. It's a guy that you could get a pretty decent return for, and because of that, you could rebuild around him. One piece isn't going to fix your offense. And I get it, George Pickens is phenomenal, but you could replace George Pickens, sign T. Higgins, save some money, and get a draft pick. And I think that works out in the Pittsburgh Steelers' favor. I do. I get it. There are fans of George Pickens. I get it. George Pickens is unreal. I'm not saying any of these things. It's just, what is the question? The question is, what happens with George Pickens? And I'm trying to explain how I think the Pittsburgh Steelers view the future of George Pickens. And I look at it and say, I do not think he's going to be around in 2025. All right. We'll actually finish it off with this one. Would you trade your first round pick for JJ McCarthy? Yes, I would. Because JJ McCarthy would be the number one pick in the draft this year. The Steelers are going to pick 22nd, 21st, something like that. I would trade JJ McCarthy in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Why wouldn't you? You're not going to get a JJ McCarthy at 20 ever in the NFL draft. Go get him. Would they? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. I would imagine there are teams like the Raiders and the Browns, maybe the Giants, who say, we have a much higher draft pick, we will trade for JJ McCarthy. But if nobody does for some reason and JJ is on the table, yes, I would trade for JJ McCarthy, hands down. All right. With that said, guys, I don't mean to jump off, but I do have to check out of this hotel room and head my butt back to Pittsburgh. So thank you guys for jumping on to a live stream post game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Don't worry, the show is not over. Don't worry, the podcast is not done for the offseason. We will be back tomorrow, bright and early, 9 o'clock, me and Nick, talking everything Pittsburgh Steelers, what's to come, what's happening, what we expect to go down in the next couple of days, everything that comes from a wild card loss and another disappointing end for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in the meantime, I hope I answered as many questions as I possibly can for you guys and gave you guys as much insight as I can from last night. Enjoy. Hopefully a sunny day in the Burgh. It's a good day here in the city of Baltimore. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/all Steelers talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, and find all our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I know it's over, but we'll be back to talk about how they could get better next year tomorrow. With that said, enjoy another beautiful one.